5 seconds to go. Start. The question of the number of people who died in India as a result of the pandemic has been festering in recent months. Scientists estimate this number by counting the total number of people who died during the pandemic and comparing this with the number of people who were expected to have died based on historical data on mortality. The difference between these two figures is referred to as excess mortality, which could be attributed to the pandemic. Note all these additional deaths are directly due to the virus. Some could also have been due to indirect effects of the pandemic, such as people dying of hunger or of other diseases because of the shutting down of the economy and routine health care during the lockdown. Nevertheless, it can be assumed that had the pandemic not happened, there would not have been any of these additional deaths. Two diametrically opposing narratives have emerged around the answer to this question. On the one hand, are the official data published by the government, and on the other, the estimates published by every other source. The government has held firmly to its estimate that just over 500,000 people have died because of COVID, that is, people whose infection status was confirmed close to the time of their death. But of course, many people who died during the pandemic never had a chance to get their COVID tests done or could have died for indirect reasons mentioned above, and this is true for all countries. This is why the excess mortality method has been accepted globally to get to the truth of the actual numbers who were struck down. The search for this truth has involved many different actors and includes journalistic accounts of funeral pyres and bodies floating down rivers, civil society accounts of the numbers of dead bodies brought to crematoria and morgues, the government's own data on the numbers of families claiming compensation for a COVID death, and a series of studies involving hundreds of scientists and institutions and published in the world's leading journals. All of these diverse sources tell a similar story. The earliest of these studies were focused on specific locations such as cities or states. These were the first to report far greater numbers of the dead than those recorded officially. These have now been supplemented by three large, scientifically peer reviewed estimates of the mortality at the national level, two of which are global studies. The first study was published in Science in January. It estimated that the true number of people who had died in India exceeded 3 million, a figure 6 to 7 times higher than reported officially. The second study, published last week in the Lancet, reports that even this massive number was an underestimate. The total number of excess deaths was 4 million. India alone counted for nearly a quarter of the global excess mortality, with more deaths than the next four countries US, Russia, Mexico, Brazil combined. Assuming that most of these excess deaths are due to COVID, India's undercounting of COVID is of the order of eightfold in comparison to the global average of about threefold. There is unsurprisingly a huge variation between states, with a handful Bihar, Assam, UP, MP under reporting deaths by as much as 20-fold, while Kerala underreported just twofold. The one outlier is my home state of Goa, estimated to have fewer COVID deaths than those reported by the government. The third report, still to be made public, is the product of a year long research by experts from around the world convened by the WHO. It also reports that excess mortality in India was about 4 million and that more than a third of the additional 9 million deaths globally occurred in India. Stop.